Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you. I'm Luther Wood, and I'm an alcoholic. Busy little meeting here you have. A lot of stuff going on. We've been here an hour. Oh, God. Let's see. I want to thank Donna for asking me to come and share with you. I love to do that because Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life. And if you be alcoholic, it will save your life, too, in spite of you. No matter whether you believe it will or not, it will save your life. I've been here for 23 and a half years. And believe me, I didn't intend to stay when I came. I thought I would be like everything else. I'd just catch, the buzzwords, and I'd be on down the Straße someplace. That had been my history all my life, to just get the buzzwords and go on, And it never, ever entered my mind that I would stay here. I mean, why would I stay here? I never needed anybody in my whole life, I mean, like I am dying for friends or somebody to talk to, that last 2 years, sitting out on the bar stool, playing my favorite songs like I'm Sorry and Born to Lose, I'm sitting out there dying, for friends or somebody, and so lonely. I know loneliness, frustration, and despair as only the alcoholic knows it, I know it in spades, but I dared you to come up and say anything to me, and would never admit to you that I needed anything, So I'm happy to be here. I think it was an exercise in tolerance. I came whizzing down the 101. I've come this way a lot of time. I used to work in this area a great deal. I've done a lot of houses around here in the design area, and right down here on Cliffside I did one, and so I came zipping over Canaan, and I bring my friend Sam with me, right? And it says road closed, or through traffic closed, or something like that, He says, no, what does he know? He has 11 years, so. But I love him. He came with me, and he's heard this story 100 million times. So then we saw a few successive signs, and and I began to worry. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm thinking, I always come early because I like Alcoholics Anonymous. I like to come here and hear that thing that I heard when I first came in these rooms. I heard the magic the first meeting I ever came to. It hums. If you sit real quiet and sit and listen to it, it hums, and the walls kind of like move with it, and it gets you so excited if you're like me, because I had a lot to say. I came here with little known facts and trivia. I mean, I had, I could have unrolled a parchment 10 feet long, and I'd sit in these rooms, and it would be like pumping, and it would get exciting, and there'd be like a lull in the conversation, and I'd dive in with did you know that the Cheops pyramid is 14,289 square feet on the base, and or I said, and then there'd be another lull, and I'd say, did you know that what's his name? Napoleon used the Sphinx as target practice in his campaigns in Egypt, and the whole room would just come to a halt. Like, what in the hell is he talking about? And thank God my sponsor, the guy that became my sponsor, said, I know how I got there. Somebody had said, oh, you like that? Oh, it's Egyptian cotton, and then I'm a newcomer, right? My mind just trails off into Egypt someplace, It would stay out there about 20 minutes, and then I'd come back in and zero on some one-liner that somebody had said. So anyhow, I know all the back roads in Malibu now. I know how to get here from Mulholland, the other way, and I still think we should have turned right on Mulholland Drive. I think we probably would have been here in 8 minutes instead of 38 minutes on that winding road down to. Sam said he was never so glad to see a virgin in his life when we hit Los Virgenes. So this is the part where I go nuts, Victoria. So I wouldn't want to get an F for the evening. So, God, I have 20 minutes. I could just keep cranking here and not even tell you the story. But I should tell you a little bit about me, because that's what they did for me, you know. And when I was new, I sat in these rooms and it just like overwhelmed me, you know, that I had found my people. It just blew me out of the water, you know. So when people told me how they got in the fix they did and how they didn't mean to do it, you know, I understood, you know. I spent a great deal of my life crazy. And I didn't mean to do that either. You know, when I was a senior in high school and I was 16 years old, the teacher said, 1 out of the 25 of you in here will go to the nut house someday as a direct result of drinking. And I remember saying it won't be me. And I went 5 times, you know. So the last time I was in the nut house, I escaped into the nut house. I had reached the what they call the nadir of alcoholism, the very lowest ebb. And I didn't know where to go and show up anymore. I just didn't know. I thought, even at the last 2 years, you know, thought, you got to be crazy to keep acting like this. You know, you just, nobody does this, you know, on the natch. So, you know, I had waken up in jail in San Francisco with a plane ticket in my pocket to Oyama, British Columbia, you know, where I was on my way to see a casual acquaintance. And I had been kicked off the aircraft in San Francisco. I didn't know anybody in this town. And as any other town that I was in, I could be in town about 20 minutes and I'd be in jail. I would see my father in Spartanburg, South Carolina, you know. And on the way to this house, I was locked up and put in jail. So it was obvious to the world that I was drunk wherever I was, you know. So I woke up in jail that morning and I was hungover and I needed a cigarette and hadn't any idea where I was, and I spent the whole weekend in jail. And they let me out on Monday, and I was hitchhiking back from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and I didn't know exactly where I was going, because I honestly, I was like the guy that the book talks about, roaring through the lives of others, you know, like a tornado and blah, 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 and, you know, sweet relationships are dead. Like, nobody was happy to see me coming, you know, at all anymore. I mean, if they saw me coming, they just screamed and locked the door and pulled the blinds down, and, you know, and nobody answered their phone because I was instant trouble. I mean, I came in to borrow a cup of sugar on Friday night and didn't go home till Monday. I just spent the weekend with you. So I was standing on the side of the road with my hippie beads on, and I'm product of the 60s, with that part that I remember, and Haight-Ashbury, you know, Countess Mara Ties and Haight-Ashbury. That was me. Likely to have hung myself there with one of those. Anyhow, I was on the side of the road hitchhiking, and this kid picked me up in a blue Volkswagen, and we're driving along there. We got along about Santa Maria, you know, and I had been 3 days without a drink. And I said, you know, isn't it strange that they would play that song 3 times in a row? You know, I really like it, but it's kind of odd they would play it 3 times in a row. And he said, I don't have a radio in this car. And he said, you're going to have to get out up here. I'm going to be turning left, you know. I mean, that's the way people were treating me toward the end, you know, like they didn't want anything to do with me anymore, you know. I mean, I had a guy mesmerized in a bar in Rossmore, and we were sitting. I could convince you of anything for about 15 minutes, you know. Brain surgery? Oh, let's discuss it, you know. So, and he says, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I'm a geologist. And he said, you are? And I said, yeah. Well, what do you do? I said, well, I don't work around here. I'm actually just down here for the weekend. I work out of Seattle, and we've discovered through U2 aircraft and infrared photography that Mount Rainier is actually an active volcano, and we expect it to explode any second. And when it does, it's going to blow a new moon in orbit, you know. At which time he said, excuse me, I've got to be leaving, you know. So I mean, that's the kind of treatment I got toward the end, you know. And, you know, it didn't start out that way. It started out as a lark, just a lark being like everybody else, you know. Just, I had no idea that of what was coming for me, you know, down the road. I had no idea at all. Although in my history, in my family history, I'd seen enough drunks. I'd seen enough suitcase drills and holes in the walls, you know, and mad and upset and jails and this and that, and my grandmother peeking through the blinds, you know, with the old sot going down, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, I had enough experience in my family and friends and all that kind of stuff. But certainly I was never able to put those things together, you know, that magical night that I got into the Tokay wine with my friend John and fell over in a trench about 7 feet down in the rain. You know, it was raining like cats and dogs, and I didn't come out of the rain for about 17 years, you know. And, you know, the thing of it was is the next day, although I had blacked out, passed out, threw up all over the place, you know, the next day I absolutely couldn't wait to do it again. It was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me. Like, bang, instantly filled all the holes. I was a whole human being for the first time in my life, you know. All those inhibitions, all that little stuff, you know. I was thinking, while you were talking, there's nothing to hide you up here at all. You might as well be naked, you know. Of course, then my mind trails off into, why do we always have to get naked, you know? But we all did, and didn't we? So he's shaking his head yes. So anyway, I pursued that illusion to the gates of insanity and death, you know, all the way to the very goddamn end. You know, that's just the way I pursued it, all the way to the end. So it was no strange thing at the very, very end when I was like waking up at 6 in the morning. I didn't know if it was 6 in the morning or 6 at night. I didn't know where my bottle was. I was terrified. I was one step ahead of a straitjacket. I was afraid of everything and everybody. Don't feel sorry for me. She's shaking her head like you can't believe it, Nana. You can rely absolutely on anything I say about myself, I assure you. It all happened. I only wish I had an hour and a half to tell you the whole story. It's very electrifying. And anyway, I pursued that illusion right up to the very end. And so I don't know what was significant about that last 3 weeks of drinking, you know, really. It was just like morning, noon, and night. I kind of got the idea I was going to die out there. I didn't bother to change clothes anymore or anything. I just lived in the same clothes for 3 weeks. I didn't bathe anymore or nothing like that. Life had become too complicated, you know. I mean, they shut my phone off. People would appear in my living room and they were waving checks around in the air saying things like, when are you going to pick these up? You know, they were saying things like, what else are you taking, you know? And I said, I'm just drink. You know, I remember a bartender asking me that because he was waving all these checks around in his hand that I had, I was a paper hanger in a way. And, and he said, nobody just drinks and acts like you do. He said, because somebody's going to kill you. He said, I want to kill you. So, you know, that's what I had become. And I went out and got me, I don't like to hear anybody say that alcoholics are weak-willed people. That's not so. I believe that we are stronger than most. You know, anybody that looks like we do and feel like we do that can get up and get out on the streets one more day and get a drink, however it is we get a drink, you know, has a whole lot of willpower, I got to tell you, you know. And so I got up that day to do the very best for me. I never went out to screw over anybody else or make a mess out of my life. I never intended to do that, you know. I just went out to see what I could do for myself that day, you know, and so I went out to get me a bottle of Tokay wine, you know, and I had to steal it, you know, and I did a lot of stealing. I did stealing right up to the very end, and I had to, see, because, well, this is a big meeting, right? I went to a bar named Trader John's like this in Pensacola, Florida, right, and all of you showed up on Friday night, and I had to buy, you know, big flash in the pan that I am, I had to buy all of you a drink, and so on Saturday morning I was like broke, you know. And if I wanted to eat or whatever or smoke cigarettes for the rest of the time, I had to steal, you know. So I did a whole lot of shoplifting, you know. When I first got, my amends list for Safeway Market was like astronomical. I mean, these poor people, when I went to Safeway, to show you how dumb they are, right, I would ask for a bag on the way in. And as I pushed my cart around, I'd fill up the bag and I'd open up those cocktails, and drink those and throw them out, in the trash as I went. And I'd get back by the meat counter, and these guys thought they died and went to heaven, because I'd order things like 2.5-inch cut porterhouse steaks, big, thick filet mignon, thick sliced bacon. They would wrap it all up. Thank you so much. Put it in my bag for me, And I'd push it up by the railing, and I'd go through the check stand without paying, and I'd grab the bag and run home, And that's the way I lived that last 2 years, I was always trying to get me and food together. I weighed about 107 pounds when I got here. I had some really expensive, beautiful clothing, and if I wanted to wear it, I had to pin it up with a great big safety pin back. Otherwise, my pants just fell straight to the floor. I mean, I would go home with that bag, and I'd fire up the oven, and I would shove the steak under it, and then I'd pour me a glass of wine. And when I came to, the house is like full of smoke, and I'd scream and jump up and throw the doors open, the windows, smoke poured out the windows, out the doors, into the patio. Nobody thought it was funny living next door to me. I mean, they were all terrified I was going to burn the building down with them in it in the middle of the night, So, that's where I wound up, living in that little apartment there. That last 3 weeks, just scared to death, and I got up to get me that last bottle of wine, and I passed through a woman and her little dog, and it was a long time after I got sober before I could touch a dog, because toward the end there, any animal looked at me, they knew something very strange walked past, because they jumped, they lunged, they acted like they were going to eat me alive, So it was a long time before I would touch a dog, any kind of dog, If people came out with me with their little dog, I just leaped backward, And children laughed at me and pointed their finger at me. I was the old drunk, and there I was, dirty, I'm sure, and didn't smell too good, and went up to Thrifty's and stole me a bottle of wine, and here's the thing, I believe, newcomers, if you're, or all of us, here, I believe that you have to be invited to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think you can come here. I don't think, because there's no way to come here. There are no directions. Now, pass go and collect $200 and go to AA. I mean, there's no way to get here, It's kind of magical getting here. And I believe that if you're here tonight, that you received an invitation from, someone said it tonight when they took their cake, a power greater than themselves. I honestly believe that. I don't care if you woke up and it was a bright idea or you read it in the newspaper. I still think you came here, we all came here, through the invitation of a power greater than yourself. And if you're new here tonight, I hope you get to stay here. I hope you get to find out the wonderful things that can happen to you in Alcoholics Anonymous, how your life turns around and change. I saw it in this room tonight. There's so much camaraderie here, Somebody said this is the only place we have to go, Well, Alcoholics Anonymous is the only place to go wherever we are, This is the last door in the hallway before the window, It's, but it's all around in this room. There's this magic in this room. There's some camaraderie here. There's some friendship here. There's some fellowship growing up around you here. There's some people saying, where were you last night? There's some people like Herb saying, I've been here 6 years. I'm taking my cake here tonight. No. This is the real magic in Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the lifeline of Alcoholics Anonymous. Get these people's number. Call them up. Go with them, be with them, go where they go and do what they do, and maybe this thing will happen to you and your life turns around and goes in another direction. And like Coco said tonight, thanks for giving me a life worth living, I mean, that's from the heart. Alcoholics Anonymous is the language of the heart. Alcohol doesn't care who you are. It's no respecter of people, okay? We come from Yale and jail and Park Avenue and park benches, And if you be alcoholic, it will beat you to death. You can't beat it. It will beat you to death. It's bigger than all of us, see? So anyhow, there I was. I lived on. I was in a phone booth, and I can't take any credit at all for getting to Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, I know that I had an invitation of some sort because I was in a phone booth, in and out of a blackout, talking to. I'd come out with my bottle of wine. I never got caught for stealing. And I'm in the phone booth, and a psychiatrist is saying, "I can't help you." Fortunately, And the voice in the other direction, which was 26 miles in the other direction, was saying, stay right where you are and we'll be down to get you, you know. And that was Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was 11:30 at night. And thank God somebody was calling on drunk people at 11:30 at night, you know. Because they must have asked where I don't remember anything else about it, you know. I went on home. And these guys showed up in my living room. They said it was real easy to find my house. It was midnight. Every light was on it. It was like a blaze with light, you know. All the doors and windows were wide open. People had been wandering in and out for weeks. They'd stolen everything that wasn't nailed down on the first floor. And they walked straight into my living room and walked right over to me. I lived on the corner of my sofa. You know, like I said, I thought I was going to die that last 3 weeks. And that's where I lived, right there. I had my cigarettes piled up in an ashtray about 18 inches high. I had all these beer cans around me, Brew 102, you know, and wine glasses and this and that and all around this little hole, this hovel that I lived in, you know. And this one guy walks up to me and he looks at me and he said, we've been right where you are. And I don't know what it is that made me mad about that. It made me, I was infuriated. I jumped up in his face and I waggled my face. I said, you have never been where I am, you know. And see, I believed that. I believed that I was different. I was green with fangs. I was the only one running around out there like that. It had never been. Nobody had ever been where I was, you know. The other guy standing there with him was about 6'5", teeth about 2 inches long, and he had a big smile. He looked like a piano, you know, smiling. And he says to me, here's the crazy part. He says to me, I had a coffee table there with hundreds of little pieces of paper on them, right? Tiny pieces of paper. And he said, what are all those little scraps of paper? And I said, these scraps of, these papers, they had thing on, like V equals T over the square root of R times the diameter of this, all about velocity and time and space-time continuum and speed. And so, you know, I said, these little scraps of paper are formulas that Albert Einstein wanted to release to the universe. But he died before he was able to, and I'm the channel that he's writing them through. I said, that's what these little scraps of paper are. And I said, by the way, he's my grandfather. So the guy that became my sponsor said, he later took me home with him and said, hey, Dottie, you think we could put up Albert Einstein's grandkid for a couple of days? This kid sent me a full-length photograph of Albert. I had the greatest secret for a few years. I tacked him up on the back of my door at work, and I was the only one that knew he was there. And I autographed it up in the corner, to Luther would love, Granddad. I loved Albert Einstein. I loved him. He and I went to the beach. We got suntanned on one side of our face. I read everything I could get my hands on him, and we were kinfolk. We just... I loved him because he was very much like me. He had looked in everywhere, including the cosmos, and found out that it wasn't there, that something made the cosmos, you know. And in our great search, who would ever have known we were going to find whatever we were looking for in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And here it is all the time. So anyhow, that guy there with him said, who became my sponsor later, said, are you going to go with us? And I didn't know who they were. And I had I don't remember anything significant about this conversation other than what I've told you, you know, and don't really know what made me say, yes, I'm going to go with you. But I said, yes, I'm going to go with you. And I went in the kitchen and poured myself a tall glass of wine, but I didn't drink it right then. And I'm glad I didn't, because he said, if you had drunk that, we'd have left you. And I can't afford to be left out there in a world that tells me it's quite all right to drink, because I don't know how to do that, you know. I can't do that today. I have found that you and I probably ain't going to get drunk today, you know. Me and God have been drunk 1,000 times on the mountaintop. But I have found that you and me and God probably ain't going to get drunk today, you know. That was one of the first things I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous. They took me to a meeting at the TLC Club the very next day at noon. and they had long tables, and we're sitting there. I didn't think anybody worked in Alcoholics Anonymous. They had people picking me up and taking me to meetings all the time. My sponsor said if you drank an hour a week, you could probably get away with one meeting a week, and so I had to go all the time. Like on Friday night, I went to the 7:30 newcomers meeting, and then I went to the 8:30 regular meeting, and then we went to dinner, and then I stayed for the midnight meeting. I used to say, you said don't get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired, and I'm so tired, when am I going to get some sleep? And they said, nobody ever died from lack of sleep. And did I go too far for you? Did I get too far ahead? Anyhow, I went upstairs and got my latest disguise, which was a pair of yellow Bermudas and a lavender tank top. I was a little bit ahead of myself here. And I had a pair of hexagonal-shaped sunglasses on that you couldn't possibly see through. No way. And down the staircase I came with it. I love disguises. I mean, when I first got sober, this girl in our group named Sweet Kay said, "Did you ever live in Belmont Shore?" This is a silly question. I lived everywhere. She said, "Did you ever stand around the street corner like at 11 o'clock at night wearing a black hat, black coat, black boots, black pants, black sweater, and black sunglasses?" And I said, "Yes." I mean, that's what I wore. That's what I wore when I didn't want you to see me. That's what I wore when I just blended into the night, So I love costumes. I mean, when I first we used to go to a place, the Roundup in Palm Springs, and I'm out there, and it was Friday night, and that's the night that they all welcome us to their fair city, give us the key, and thank us for not all being drunk at the same time in their fair city, and all 5,000 of us, and this policeman keeps staring at me, and he says, "I know you," and I said, "You do not know me." And he said, "Well, I do know you." And I just turned my back on him and said, "You don't know me." And then he pulls on me, and he says, "Let me ask you, were you ever arrested in the middle of Palm Springs in the summer wearing like Bermudas and a fur coat?" And I said, "You may know me." So so I came down the staircase with my disguise, and out the door I went with these people. And that started my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous. As I understand the journey, it's like an infinite child on an infinite journey. And there's hope for us all, because it's never ending, They took me home with them, and I woke up in the morning, and I didn't know where I was. I had somebody else's pajamas on, and I heard this murmur going on in the kitchen, and I just followed the trail of voices, and there were all these people. They're all sitting around, and they're talking, that magic, And they shoved a protein drink in my hand, and I drank it down, and I threw it up instantly. That began my day in Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't keep anything on my stomach for about 5 days, I'm sitting around in this nook, and they were all laughing and carrying on, and I wasn't going to laugh. I know they were trying to make me laugh, but I wasn't going to laugh, because I knew if I started laughing, they would just clap the straitjacket on me and haul me off, So I wasn't going to laugh, but they were saying things like, "Do you know it's the first drink that gets you drunk?" And I said, "What?" And they said, "You see, I didn't know that. I didn't know. I always thought if I didn't have that last half pint, that last drink, I wouldn't have gone back to the nut house, to jail, to this, or been in the wreck, or blah, blah, blah. I didn't know that it was the locomotive that killed me, not the caboose. I didn't know it was the first one that set up something at me that it did not in other people. I often say I'd sit down and have a glass of wine with my grandmother. She went to bed and I went to jail. It simply did something for me it did not do for her. So, my jaw was like slack, and right then I understood something, that it set up something at me, that I was caught up in the grips of an illness from which I would never escape, As I understand alcoholism today, you never recover from this, We recover, yes, from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, but not from the disease of alcoholism, So, of course, there's some things to do around here. There's some steps to get busy on and get working and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, Of course, I didn't know any of that when I got here. And it's probably a good thing I didn't know any of that and how far down the road it was, how long the road was going to be and how much there was going to do, because I don't know about you, but I would still be balking, But But you know what I learned to do? I learned to put one foot in front of another and simply do what was in front of me to do, you know. And these people took me with them. They took me every place with them. They shared with me freely what had been given to them, you know. Didn't cost me a dime. My sponsor used to say, it doesn't take much of a man, it takes all of him, you know. And I understand that today, you know. So, God, the time flies here, Donna. I hope I leave you with just a couple of things here that I'd like to tell you how wonderful my life is today. How many friends I have. I have a lot of people in this room that I know. People that I gave plenty of time that they could go to another meeting. People that I've grown to love unconditionally, who love me in an equal fashion, you know. People like this kid here to see this get turned around, you know, and go in another direction, just like it happened to me, you know. There's a life here that we never dreamed was possible, and it's all as a result. Someone said it tonight when they took the cake, as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous, and simply, you know, putting one foot in front of another and doing what's in front of us to do. That's all there is to do, really, you know. And if you hang around these people, there's something called peer pressure. Every time you have as much as a hangnail, they want to know what step you're on, you know. I've been around long enough now that I found a power greater than myself. Someone brought that up tonight, you know. The most wonderful thing that ever happened to me. The thing that I never thought would happen to me. I knew you had it. I could see it all over you. It was in your clothing even, you know. And I felt safe with you. I knew that whatever you had, if I could just sit next to you, which I did frequently, you know, it would just spill all over me, you know. And that's essentially what's happened to me, you know, in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have something very special going on here, you know. We have the ability to pass this knowledge on to somebody. Let me tell you one more thing and I'll be quiet here, okay? I made a 12-step call on a guy in Tucson, Arizona. We went over there to live for about 8 years. And Gordon Johnston lived in a very magical address, 1212 Hedrick Street, okay? 12 and 12. He lived next door to a recovery house and he was dying of alcoholism, you know. I couldn't hardly get the door open. Gordon had been in this house a long time. It was a very drunk house, okay? Like there was trash up to my kneecaps. There were Whopper wrappers, McDonald's, you know, pizza boxes, and you know what was growing out of the kitchen was like a little shop of horrors. You know, Gordon had thrown up on the telephone so often it wasn't even recognizable as a phone anymore, and he's laying there on a sofa at a 45-degree angle, and watching TV without any sound. And I understood that. I mean, you know, if I wanted to call you up, I never used the phone. I just called you up, and, you know. I sit down on the high end of the sofa, and I started telling this story to Gordon, you know. When I walked in that house, Gordon was stupid drunk. He was just stupid drunk, right? And he's laying there with his glasses tied on his head because he has epileptic seizures and he can't afford to lose his glasses, you know. And I start telling him this story. And Gordon leans up on one elbow, and he looked at me, and as clear as I'm saying to you right now, he said, "You know." And I said, "Yes, and now you know." Thank you, Donna.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.